Hey everyone, it's your host, Marcus Norman of Gentleman Style Podcast Show. And today, you guys are in for a very special treat. I have an incredible guest today. This man, you know him, you all seen him. If you don't know him, shame on you. If you are in the Airbnb space and have not checked out this man, has not connected to this gentleman that I'm bringing to the podcast stage, he's a legend in the Airbnb space. He's changing the face of Airbnb, and he's gotten us through some very difficult times, some very unique times through the Airbnb. There was COVID-19 pandemic, and then there was the Airbnb pandemic. And this man is the face and has been helping us change the game and make more money and take our business to the absolute next level. I have coming to the stage the incredible Mr. Sean Rakidzich. Forgive me. Rakidzich, coming to the Gentleman Style Podcast stage. So, without further ado, help me welcome Mr. Sean himself.
Thanks, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here, sir. Thank you for being on the Gentleman Style Podcast stage. You are my hero, and I wanted to say that to you publicly. Sir, you are absolutely amazing, and you are doing it. Sir, I gotta ask. Absolutely. You have an incredible mind, and you have been doing Airbnb for as long as I can remember. But what got you started in the Airbnb arbitrage, Airbnb professional space? Because it's a unique business. What got your mindset going past just the average person just holding on to a few listings and going beyond and actually turning it into a scalable business?
Well, my world, I was in the newspaper industry. You might have already known that, right? Back 2014. So I was doing even kind of like not a normal version of it right away, right? So I had a business that I was putting employees into apartments to try to prevent, to lower my cost, you could say. So I had sales teams with employees. I was recruiting them, got them to come to Houston from all sorts of places like Detroit or LA. And as a relocation package, they stayed in these apartments. But I made the big mistake of signing year-long leases and only giving employees like free stays for like 2 months as like a relocation package. So people would always just move out of these things. And so what happened is I ended up with 3 empty apartments by the time it was done, and I was just like losing money on them. So I put those on Airbnb at the end of 2014. So my initial arbitrage play was just kind of like this triage to prevent myself from like losing like money on these rents. And I just floated on like 3 or 4 apartments for about 2 years, from 2015 until 17. Then Houston announced they were going to host the Super Bowl, Falcons versus the Pats, where like I think the Falcons were like up 21 points in the first quarter, and then they blew the lead. And so I heard enough story from the Houston Chronicle, which is my client. They published in their own paper that they were going to make that people were going to make $1,000 a night renting their places out. And so me being on Airbnb already, knowing how much I was making, like 150, 175 a night, I'm like, that's a lot of money. So I just kind of blitzed. I talked to all my buildings that I had already and talked to a couple new buildings and decided instead of just like managing the ones that I had, just start to aggressively try to get as many doors as possible by the Super Bowl. And I got to 10. And then we made like $15,000 net that weekend. And after that, I was kind of like sold. I'm like, this is scalable. So that was February 2017. I was like eyeballing this idea of scale. And then I started my YouTube channel maybe March, May, June 2017. And I still had 10 doors at that point. But combination of the Super Bowl and me starting a YouTube channel, I kind of committed to growing at that point because I kind of put my name on the line, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. You put your name on the line. You've been doing this for a really long time. Super powerful. But you could do anything, right? You could have started. Why not go into rental property, right? The Robert Kiyosaki's of the world, right? I consider you the Robert Kiyosaki of Airbnb. Why not traditional real estate? What was it that sparked your interest specifically in Airbnb? Because that is a lot of money. $15,000 net. That's what you said, right? $15,000 net. That's a lot of money.
Weekend, yeah.
In a weekend. Was it the money? Was it the simplicity of it? Why not go into traditional real estate investing?
Well, I actually just have never been a real estate person, right? So I think maybe out of all of it, it was just lack of context. So my best friend's a real estate agent, and he was back then, and that was his thing. But he did apartment locating. He was making all of his money like leasing apartments to people. So even his version of real estate didn't include buying or selling properties yet. So I literally knew no one, not a single soul who was buying property back then. It just wasn't in my circle. My parents weren't buying real estate, obviously, because my parents weren't really good role models or whatever. My friends' parents weren't buying real estate. I just had no connection to the world. So as a guy who built sales teams and then rented apartments to try to like create some synergy and then stumbling into short-term rentals, the lens at which I saw short-term rentals was not a real estate lens. And I'll even die on this hill today that short-term rentals are not real estate. Like I'll tell people, or I'll make a point, I'll say, do you think the barber that rents the building that his barbershop's in a real estate business because he rents the barbershop? No, he makes all of his money from cutting hair. A grocery store is not in the real estate business. Even if they owned the building, they're still not in the business of real estate. Their value delivery is all like grocery logistics, right? So I've never seen short-term rentals as real estate. I will say till I die, short-term rentals is not real estate, it's hospitality. And because of the way I got involved in it, and no one I knew bought real estate, there's no one in my ear saying, hey, dude, maybe you should buy the property instead. I just started scaling the rental side. And by the time I made my YouTube channel, my real estate buddy was starting to like try to get into being a buyer's agent. And he was arguing with somebody about debt pay down or cash on cash return. And by the time he even thought about buying real estate, I was so deep in Airbnb arbitrage that I just knew the numbers off the back of my head. And there was not a single number that was better buying than doing arbitrage. There's just nothing that it didn't hold a candle. Like arbitrage, as far as rate of wealth growth, would outpace buying by 3 or 4x. So by the time I even had the thought that maybe buying real estate was an option, the math for arbitrage just whooped it day and night. So there was really no point in buying at all.
And that's fair. And that's fair, right? Your circle didn't lead you down the path that other people did. Your circle, and then when you found people and your best friend who was in real estate was doing it, the numbers didn't compare. It didn't compare to the Airbnb numbers that you knew like the back of your hand or like the back of a napkin.
Yeah.
And so that's fair. That's a fair request. What are some big misconceptions people have? You've been doing this for a really long time. What are some big misconceptions people have about running an Airbnb business at scale? Because I think everybody, and you teach to this, you teach people to get out of the mindset of not just owning 1 or 2 Airbnb listings. It's run it like a business and grow it like a business. What is a misconception that you think hold people back?
Well, I'd say that people would probably enter this business with a bias that every single property creates more work, right? And that's actually that's really not true. There's this old school business concept that they use a lot in manufacturing called a throughput. The amount of resources that you have to have available to start a property is by far greater than the amount of resources that you need to have to run it, right? So when you start a property, you have to get your hands on the property. You got to furnish it, which means you got to design it. You've got to spend all the time wrenching together the furniture, take the photos, make the listing, launch it. That's laborious. The moment that it exists, it's like 30 minutes a reservation of work at max, like 15, 10 sometimes, because some people are easy. They're just like, what's the Wi-Fi password and done. Like, then there's the turnover, but very few people actually clean their own properties. But if you have a 3-bedroom house that you have on Airbnb, your weekly load might be an hour of reservation management and 4 or 5 hours of cleaning max. And so if you hire housekeepers, you're looking at an hour a week is what you're looking at, outside of like, spikes of stuff like maintenance requests or something going wrong. You're an hour a week per property. So when you launch a property or 3 properties, the difference between an hour of work and 3 hours of work, because you're doing it from your cell phone anyway, feels like nothing. It's insignificantly different. So people, what I think they misunderstand when they get stuck at 1 or 2 is they believe that the work is going to like balloon and they're going to like lose control of the business. And that's actually not true. What people may not have is they may not have the weekend to dedicate to wrenching together furniture and making an Airbnb. But I've got students, that's what they do. Friday, after they get off their 9 to 5, they've got the keys for a new lease. And their goal is to get it done by Monday morning when they go back to work the next day or the next weekend. If they can get it done in a weekend, they win. Otherwise, they're a little delayed and they have to wrap up Monday night or whatever. But they'll launch a property over the weekend. And then it's like almost in a way passive while you're small. And the way the work changes is when you have to add layers of complexity. So if you have 10 properties, you have multiple cleaners, and now you have multiple cleanings a day, right? And you might have multiple check-ins a day, and you'll have a higher likelihood of somebody sending you a message after midnight needing something, which means the hours of your availability will start to widen. And then at 25 doors, you're going to need a manager or an assistant to work with you because you can't be up till 2 a.m. every single day and then up early talking to housekeepers every day. You might start to burn out. So the extra layers of difficulty or complexity create the actual work. So the work builds wide instead of building deep. You're never really going to put, 60 hours a week into the business before you start hiring extra people. So I think that is a big misconception of the business is it's easy, but it's broad. And thus that's where people kind of get caught up. They're afraid to scale because they think they're going to be working too hard. But what they'll run into is just the need to hire the right people. I think that's the biggest misconception about the business. And now for 2025, the biggest misconception now is because people think it's real estate, I think people may accidentally cut the corner of not doing market research to identify the right property type, right product in the right market, and then do the right interior design. Because we have plenty of supply now. 10 years ago, there was nothing. So now, 10 years later, if you want a property to do good, you need to identify what people want. And thank God the Airbnb algorithm kind of gives us that on the front page. And then we need to copy what's working with enough originality that we can say we have our own listing. But I think a lot of people now, if they're going to make one mistake, they're going to set up a property based on just what they think Airbnb is. And they're probably going to have a property that's like too bland and doesn't really meet the market's needs. And that is something really to consider in 2025. 10 years ago, that wasn't even a thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I need to do you more justice, and I need to do right by you. And I need to ask this question for those that don't know you. You are the expert and professional, and you coach and mentor people in what is known as Airbnb arbitrage. And so, can you give my listeners what is Airbnb automation? What is Airbnb arbitrage? Forgive me, Airbnb automated. What is Airbnb arbitrage for those watching you trying to figure out what I'm talking about?
Okay. So yeah, Airbnb Automated is the old name for the YouTube channel. I get to go by my name now because Airbnb politely asked me not to use their name on YouTube anymore. That's fine. Airbnb arbitrage is a fun misnomer. What we do isn't even technically arbitrage, actually. So what it is you take a property that you do not own and you get the landlord to rent it to you, right? That's the key difference between co-hosting, right? And we'll have to explain that for the kids in the back. You get a landlord to rent you a property. You guarantee the rent, and that's all you pay is the rent. You're not giving the landlord any upside. You just say, I'll pay the rent. Then you furnish that property that you're now renting. You get a year-long lease, 2-year-long lease, whatever. And now that it's furnished, you then operate it as a short-term rental. So there was something that was in the long-term rental market, like a house or an apartment. The same thing you and I could move into right now. Same landlord. You take that long-term 12-month longer lease and you furnish it, you pay the bills, and you're lowering all these barriers to live there. When somebody rents an apartment, it might be $1,500 a month, right, for that apartment. But they have to commit to a year-long lease, and they have to pass the background check, and they've got to pass the financial screening. And then they have to set up their internet and electricity, and then they have to get the furniture, and there's all these things. What arbitrage in this way does is it takes that long-term product and renatures it and removes all of those barriers. Now the property is furnished. There's no lease. There's no there's a background check with Airbnb. There's no financial screening. There's no obligation to stay any more than a day or two. You don't have to buy your furniture. You don't have to set up the electricity or the internet. And all of these conveniences, all of these barriers coming down is how you justify increasing the price and creating margin. And the reason why I say it's not arbitrage is because it's no longer the same product. And arbitrage by definition would be, if I can buy electricity for 5 cents a kilowatt and then I can sell it for 6, I'm arbitraging like electricity at 1 cent a kilowatt, 20% markup. In this world, we're taking long-term product, taking possession of it, but by adding furniture and stuff, we're actually changing its industry and changing its nature. So that's why I say it's a misnomer. But for the simple answer is we take long-term and make it short-term and collect the margin. Co-hosting, since we'll put this on Airbnb, but you buy the furniture, you pay the bills, you pay the electricity, and then I'm going to do my best and I'm going to keep a small percentage. That one's really hard for people to get started. And I think that's the thing that we talk about a lot now lately. There's a lot of people pitching co-hosting as a way to start Airbnb. But man, I do co-hosting. You probably do co-hosting. A lot of us do. I don't think a newbie with 0 property and 0 experience could really make a pitch to a business owner / landlord investor type and get them to really think that they can, with 0 experience, run a property on Airbnb. So arbitrage may be the best way to do Airbnb because it's a combination of inexpensive and possible. After you have a property or 3, then you could co-host. But that co-host has no guarantee to the landlord. You're not guaranteeing rent or anything. So that's the main difference. Is arbitrage, you guarantee to pay the rent. Co-host, you don't.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you for taking the time to delicately break that down. That was absolutely powerful. And it's the thing. So is it still the thing where I'm renting from property management, or have we completely migrated into renting a house from and having that discussion with the landlord or the homeowner and saying, listen, I'm running a business and this is what I'm doing. It's a professional setup. I have websites, all the things. I have the YouTube channel that finds the listings and clients, and the website that clients find me and book my property. What is the path that we're going to today? Because I remember during that time, there was a lot of landlords and property management companies considering it subleasing, which is in most contracts and most rental contracts illegal or not allowed. So what is the path today? Has that changed, or is it still the same?
The path to doing arbitrage as far as getting
Yes, sir.
permission. Yeah. So even though a lease says you can't, right? Because in 2014 they didn't, right? And then 2017, 18, these buildings started adding no short-term rental language into their model, into their leases. It's an agreement. It's not the law. It's just a contract. And so we go to the building owner, if it's an apartment complex or a landlord, and say, this is what we do. Of course, my script is not so just like, hey, this is what we do. Please say yes. It's a little bit more elegant. But the end goal, like any sale, is to get them to change their contract. That's it. And with a single-family homeowner, we'll provide them what we call like a lease addendum. It's just a ride-along document that says, landlord and I signed a lease, but this addendum modifies that lease and overwrites some of the language. And so it's kind of a buddy ride-along. With apartment complexes, if there's enough bureaucracy, we may just get them to agree in an email chain of all the variables that we want to make a change on, because that email chain is arguably a written waiver of terms of the lease, right? The lease addendum is a little bit more ironclad, and in civil court, like a landlord might have a bit of an ego and change his mind and then want to lie. So because a little landlord might want to lie, a lease addendum's safe. But a big company where people could get fired for doing stupid stuff, an email chain showing that the whole company approved a variation of the lease has stood the test of time for 10 years, believe it or not. We've had some spats with some buildings, and like management changed or ownership changed, and we showed them the email chain where we got permission from the property management company, and they're like, well, I guess that's it then. And so even though some lawyers may say that's not good enough, my personal experience is as long as you do negotiate terms and you get it in writing somewhere, that writing somewhere proves that you're not being like illicit if the building management ever changes. And that's the most important thing, because honestly too, if a landlord doesn't like you or a building doesn't like you, it doesn't matter what you sign. They will find a way to get you out of the building. So with apartment complexes, we're a little bit more loose on what we qualify as written consent. With a single family homeowner, we really make sure we get that addendum. But as long as you negotiate negotiate the terms, you're good.
Mr. Sean, my hero here on the Gentleman Style Podcast Show today. This man is spilling the tea and helping us do it big in the Airbnb space. So, Mr. Sean, can you debunk this myth? Is it still, because a lot of landlords got out of the Airbnb space, especially when Airbnb changed the laws around cancellation policies during COVID-19. That knocked a lot of landlords out of the business, because Airbnb, I was one of them. They got in there, and I had a semi-strict cancellation policy. And then Airbnb said, nope, we're going to amend your cancellation policy. Anybody that says COVID-19 or sneezes COVID-19 can break your contract and get out. I had a year out booking. And so a lot of landlords got out the business. Is Airbnb still a viable investment today? Can you debunk that myth?
So I'll say it's not an investment if we're talking Airbnb specifically, right?
Okay.
If we're talking property, God, like my best friend, he's like, dude, I'm having a hard time selling properties right now, because short-term rentals might be the only way that you can make a building make sense right now, with mortgage rates and how inflated prices are, since like the Fed printed all this cash and now home prices are through the roof because of the kind of like that leverage, the hedge against the dollar. Property values go up when you print cash. Now everything's so expensive. I don't think you could be a landlord and make the numbers work, right? Your mortgage may outpace the rental market because of just your interest rate, right? So if you don't have a lot of equity in your home, buying a house and becoming a landlord in a lot of cases doesn't really work. So short-term rentals may be the only way to buy and then perform to make enough cash. But the performance of Airbnb is not an investment. It is absolutely a business that we're operating. And because of this is a global variable. Let's say it like that. The real estate market is XYZ hard. The financial landscape is XYZ hard. Airbnb's policies are XYZ hard. Host sentiment is XYZ hard. And the worse all of these get, the more that people quit. And when people quit, that directly affects supply. And we're always in this like dance of demand and supply. And anything that drives down supply increases the value of supply in relationship to the demand. So I say when the going gets tough, like we make all the money. So we would love the industry to be hard enough for long enough that more people quit, because then we're positioned on the back end to make all the money. And what's cool about this is if we ever are in a time where people have quit, then the people who come in will have an easier time. So I think the fact that people quit after 2023, wait, they call it the Airbnb bust, right? It wasn't just COVID, but the Airbnb bust was a thing. And then Airbnb and Vrbo increasing their cancellation policies, like their fines for that. And then Airbnb's like removal of over 400,000 listings with their like non-circumvention policy, where if they like shut down one of your listings, they make sure that you can't recreate it. That is pushing a lot of supply out. I will say that a lot of the supply from Airbnb's new policy changes is actually pushing out bad supply. So you still have to deal with the good contenders. But I will also say, when there's good product in a market, that product is visible. You can see it on the Airbnb platform when you search. And I teach my students something called the copycat strategy. You find something that works. You find something with reviews. You find something where the calendar is booked in the future. You just find a product that is viable. We can reverse engineer their pricing rates, because we can look at what their prices are on the calendar, find out what they're making. We find a profitable listing and we copy the listing. Because the cool thing about Airbnb, unlike a restaurant, is there's only one table in the restaurant, right? If the Airbnb is booked for the night, it's booked for the night. If you were a restaurant and you were competing with a restaurant across the street and you were the second best restaurant and you only got business when they got full, then they would have to completely fill up all their tables. The more tables that they have, the more you have to wait. But with Airbnb, if one customer takes that business for the night, you become next in line. And because of scale in almost any travel market, there's more than one person booking in Miami every day, right? By far. So you can copy the best listings in the market, and it definitely pays to be the second best listing in the market. Because as soon as your one competitor's booked, you're in pole position. So it is in that way easy, but to sell that as easy money would be a little bit disingenuous, and I'll tell you the story why. If you're good at this, it will work. But I have students in Dubai, and my students in Dubai wanted to pick up properties by the Burj Khalifa, and they were shopping around for different apartment complexes that look at the Burj Khalifa, and they had picked a couple of buildings based on the fact that the area made money. But before they signed their leases, we were doing market research, and I stumbled over something that they didn't notice yet, which is that the view out of the bedroom windows or the living room windows for all of the units that were making the most money, those living rooms looked at the Burj Khalifa. If you had an apartment complex that was looking away from the Burj Khalifa, even though you were right there, you'd make about 35% less. The view out the window made money. And so AirDNA doesn't tell you that. There's no software on the planet that can tell you that the Burj Khalifa area needs a Burj Khalifa view, or that if you're in Rome by the Colosseum, that your apartment needs a Roman Colosseum view. And if you do that, you'll make triple the money in Rome. You'll make triple. These are these very nuanced things. And so the copycat strategy sounds easy in application. Sometimes it is easy in application, but there's plenty of nuance. And the more you know about this industry, the easier it is, or the more realistic it is, that you can print a carbon copy of a listing and you don't miss any of the X factor stuff that is what actually is making something money.
Absolutely. Do you in determining which markets I should put my Airbnb in, should I consider one of the things I heard, I doubt it was from you, or it was that Airbnb is moving away from rentals and they're moving more into like the luxury uniqueness, right? People want to rent a boat. People want to rent uh um treehouse, right? They want to rent Airbnb. Yeah, they want to rent Airbnbs and tree houses. They want those unique experiences, and they're kind of bored and tired with the traditional. Oh, I can rent this space. I can rent this house. I'm gonna sleep here for a couple nights, or I have a local event, or the Super Bowl is playing here, and that type of stuff. Is it true? What have you seen in the market considerations? Is it true that people are going for? I want to rent a camper. I want to rent a trailer. I want to rent RV. I want to rent a yacht in the Airbnb space.
Yeah. So the evolution of what product performs, it is an interesting conversation, right? So initially, any Airbnb was novel because it was an Airbnb, all of them, right? Done. But then size became a factor because the thing that hotels can't provide is size. And so size is insulated. If you can build at size, there's a lot of markets just by having a big listing, you can win. But then there came the amenities arms race, right? We need a hot tub, we need a pool, we need a sauna, we need pickleball. That's dying, believe it or not. The amenities arm race was just another form of novelty. It's always been novelty. It's always been uniqueness. Airbnb was unique. Then big Airbnbs are unique because hotels can't provide that. But those big Airbnbs now have a pool or a hot tub. That made those individual listings unique against the big listings, right? It's always been about positioning some form of unique selling proposition. But now, I'm going to say this story in a slightly masked way because we did this market research just last week for a student. There's some properties on a lake we're going to call Lake Wonderful, okay? There was a property that's worth $1 million that somebody just bought like 3 months ago to put on Airbnb. Beautiful 5 or 6 bedroom house, beautiful pool, hot tub. They bought nice furniture, huge ceilings, beautiful chandelier, amazing furniture. This property would do $250,000 or better in Miami. Okay, perfect for Miami. But on Lake Wonderful, it is getting its ass kicked. It is overpriced. It is just clean and sterile, and nobody's getting it. Nobody's buying it. But just down the street on the same lake, Grandma's house is making double the money because Grandma's house is priced less. This one wants $900 a night. Grandma's house goes for like $450 to $600. Okay, so it's already priced more affordable. But Grandma's house, even though the photos suck, even though it's a single level home without a pool, they both have lake access. They both have a pier. And Grandma's house has photos of families doing family stuff. It provides paddle boards. It provides kids games and all this other stuff. The offering is exactly what families want on Lake Wonderful. But this person who is caught up in their biases about the amenities arms race overspent on a property that was too big, that costs too much to maintain, the pool and everything, that they needed to justify their numbers at a higher nightly rate. And Grandma's house provides what people want at an affordable price. So now there's this intersection of value and product market fit that is starting to come ahead of the Globo Gym listings. And that's a big part of the meta in 2025.
Absolutely. So they need to, so you do the research, your team and you do the research to figure out where is a viable place to invest and own an Airbnb or build out an Airbnb, because you're right. I don't want to spend millions of dollars and now I've overinflated and I require them to pay me more than Grandma's house. And that wasn't even necessary to begin with. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, in large. Grandma's house would sell for about $300,000 less, and it's making $150,000 a year, where Global Gym is doing like 80. And I do market research with my students until they can do it themselves, right? So I've got a lot of new students. So like every week on Saturdays, I do my Zooms with my students. They go about 6 hours a lot of times. So I spend 6 hours with my students every Saturday, and there's always some newbies in there. So we always touch some pricing strategy. We always touch some market research. These are like common things people want to learn when they're new. And then we answer pretty much any other question. But I do the market research for my students in order to show them the process and show them like how my brain works and what the outcomes are. Eventually, my students can do all this market research on their own. So this just happened to be a coincidence that I was doing some comps on some properties that, that people are looking for deals, and they're like, I don't know exactly how to figure this out. And so along our journey, we end up stumbling over truths like this. But yeah, so I do teach them. I do the market research for them if they can't do it themselves, but always with the goal of coaching them to be, their own business owner.
Absolutely. I know everything seems like up and to the left, right now in this conversation. I want to ask about learned experiences. Have you ever had a listing that completely failed? And what did you learn from that listing failing?
Yes. Actually, my sixth listing ever, number 6, right? Remember I said it blitzed up to 10 before the Super Bowl? One of them was one of the listings that I set up for my like employees, right? I got this 2-bedroom apartment in the Galleria, Houston. They moved out, and this was before the Super Bowl, long enough before the Super Bowl. I didn't put it on Airbnb right away because I had a friend. She was in an abusive relationship, and she wanted out of the relationship. She needed a place to stay. She said she was going to pay me the rent, and so I let her move in. I basically had to evict this woman from my 2-bedroom apartment that I was renting, right? Months later. And by the time I got possession of the property again, she had wrecked the place entirely, just destroyed it. I rushed to get the thing listed by the Super Bowl. I got a rug doctor in there, and I used it the wrong way. So all I did was get a dirty carpet wet and made the place smell super bad. And each room had like a really ugly queen bed. So I had a 2-bedroom with 2 ugly queen beds. Like the place was just kind of like run down already. And it was an A-class property. I lost like $600 or $800 a month with that listing until I decided that I'm going to like strip the bedrooms, like reinvest a little bit. Back then, I also knew nothing about design. So like my version of an improvement actually looks really amateur. It looks pretty bad. Actually, I looked through the photos a week ago. The new version was still bad, by the way, but I put 2 queen beds in each room. So instead of sleeping 4 people, I could sleep 8. And I slightly improved it so it was less ugly, but it was still ugly. And then that 2-bedroom became profitable, right? That was my first mistake that I fixed. My biggest mistake, we picked up 40 doors, 40, in the energy corridor of Houston. And this was actually when I retired for like 2.5 years, right? So I got out of the business, traveling the world, fell in love, the whole thing. And the girl who was running my company, she was in charge of setting up these 40 doors. And I didn't think to make sure that she was going to do it right. I didn't really care. I was really living high on the hog, being fully automated. You couldn't have talked me into coming to a meeting, right? So she set up 40 doors, and they were all identical. They all looked exactly the same. But we also paid a furnishing company that was terrible at what they did. And we paid a little too much money for insanely ugly furniture, like completely like out of scale, no color, no personality. And out of the 40, we'd have 5 of them rented at any one time. We had 35 empty doors always.
Oh
We lost about $500,000 on that deal. And we just had to shut it down. Our solution was shut it down. There was no solve. So now that was the turning point where I really started to go, we can never oversupply a look. We can never oversupply a territory without proving that it can handle the volume. So I've since changed my approach to interior design. And I also have a vetting system based on PACE, which is a pricing strategy, revenue management metric. I've got a PACE-driven market analysis approach that will tell us whether or not we can add more doors. And we never go to war with 40 doors unless we can prove the market first, but we'll often launch with like 10, and we'll scale based on our PACE data. So yeah, we've definitely evolved after taking that $500,000 hit to the face. So
that's a huge lesson. Wow. That does suck. How do you? I've had issues in maintenance with maintenance teams and the logistical nightmare. Guests destroying my bed, right? Destroying the bed. In your case, the 2 queen size beds. How do you handle maintenance and cleaning logistics across so many? I think it's 155 properties, or that's probably grown by now. But how do you handle the maintenance and the cleaning logistics?
So maintenance, cleaning, logistics, you're going to silo this. Remember when I said it built wide when you're small? Well, it builds wide immediately, but then, like a city, it starts to build tall as you get more doors, right? So at about 25 or 30 doors in one city, you've now built as wide, like topic matter-wise, as you could. And then from 30 doors to 100 or more, you start to build deep. So you start to hire people who have their silos. Somebody handles revenue management. Somebody handles guest experience resolutions. Somebody handles housekeepers, right? Somebody handles supply chain, like soaps and shampoo and stuff. Somebody handles maintenance, all of it. Prevention is the key. They say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, in Airbnb world, when you can not only give a full refund, but take a 50% penalty to the face if it's a forced cancellation, an ounce of prevention is worth a wheelbarrow full of cure, right? My beds are reinforced, and the reinforcements are reinforced. The last thing I want is for a couple to be doing their thing at 1 a.m., drunk in bed, having fun, and then the bed breaks. And then they're furious, right? That's never happening again. Backup plans need backup plans. And you should, based on how hard it is to fix something or how slow it is to fix something, you need to be positioned for that. So for example, we have TVs in storage that already have, they're already logged into everything. Our Wi-Fis are all the same name with all the same password. So no matter where a TV breaks, our maintenance guy grabs the TV, runs to the new place. If the TV broke or was stolen, they put the new TV on the wall, plug it in, it automatically connects to the internet. There's no mental load that comes from having to figure out what the Wi-Fi password is for maintenance. They just put the TV up and it's guaranteed to connect. And these preventative measures of making sure that all of your Wi-Fis are the same name, it pays in spades later. If a guest is like, what's the Wi-Fi password? And you have a new person who's handling guest messages, they only have to remember one user lane. They don't have to go find the information. And if they don't know how to transverse your documentation, it's going to be okay. They know the password name and Wi-Fi because it's always going to be the same. So that's an example of a prevention. It's also a convenience because whenever a customer books property A or property D, when they walk in, if they're a return guest, all their stuff automatically connects to the Wi-Fi. They now have this like unified experience. That's really cool. Supply chain has multiple stops, right? Imagine that you've got a pot with a vase inside of it, and you go to fill up the vase. Well, if the vase gets too full, it cascades into the pot, and the pot would have to fill up before it splashes everywhere, right? This is a reverse version of inventory control. Your level 1 inventory control is often like a bin that's in your house or a closet that's locked, that's full of supplies. And when that gets low, you pull from another centralized storage. You're not purchasing anything yet. You're going to have a storage shed or like one of those storage units. I forget. Like I was trying to name one of the companies, like Public Storage or whatever. And so you're going to have your closet or your bins. And if they start to get low on supplies, somebody goes to your public storage and pulls a new bin, right? And then just drops off the new bin, takes the half empty one, and you worry about restocking later. Otherwise, somebody comes loaded up and they restock the closet from the public storage. And then when public storage gets low, that's when you start to buy stuff. You actually buy stuff to top off your centralized supply. And your centralized supply makes sure that all the other like auxiliary buildings are always topped off. So you're never going to have a situation where an apartment or a house runs out of a supply and you don't already own the backup, because the backup is held within a 3-mile distance or 4-mile distance in a more centralized storage. So this is an example of the redundancy that hospitality requires.
I love that. That's huge. Do you guys hear the level of think, right? That is incredible. I never thought of that. I was sitting there racking my brain and having to rely on my cleaners to tell me when I'm out of wine, when I'm out of coffee, when I'm out of K-cups, when I'm out of toilet paper. So all the maintenance person has to do is go to the storage unit and always top off, and I can just focus on making sure the supply unit, the storage unit, is always filled with the products it needs. Do you have like relationships with any wine company?
Tell you that's still not going to solve your problem, though.
Well, it's a lot better though.
But
why won't that solve my problem?
Your housekeepers don't want to do everything, right? They want to do enough, but they don't want to do everything, and that becomes a huge problem. So with apartment complexes, we let our housekeepers self-inspect by uploading photos, and then we look at their photos. But for houses, we don't let our housekeepers self-inspect. We actually inspect the housekeeper's work on the back end because the risk is so high, because the nightly rate's so high that if they screw up, there needs to be a second set of eyes on it, right? We can't trust housekeepers to do everything. And so when it comes to supply, it's almost impossible to trust a housekeeper to tell you when you're out of coffee or wine or when you're low on a certain cleaning supply. A housekeeper, they'll run out of Windex and they'll run out of whatever, and they'll just clean with what they have. If they don't have a vacuum that day, they'll just try to clean without the vacuum, and they won't tell you that they don't have the vacuum, right? They have this like really weird employee behavior. Doesn't matter if you pay them by the job or you pay them by the hour. Everybody goes through this like I couldn't be bothered phase of work. So we have a 5-step cleaning system that everybody adheres to. And that 5-step cleaning system, they have to go through the 5 steps in order to have done their job for the day. So you actually have to build a cleaning process that is impossible for them to skip out on the things that are core to the business. And that could include supply. But even with our houses, we don't trust a housekeeper all the way. We trust them as far as we can throw them in that way. And so your big properties need inspection. And what's good is if you have a mix of big properties and small properties, when your housekeepers know that there is inspection happening, they tend to just behave universally until they figure out that you're only inspecting properties of a certain size or higher, right? If they figure out your game, they'll slack where they can get away with it. But then you randomly do some inspections in some apartments once in a while, just to keep this controlled chaos. And as long as there's enough inspection going on, the housekeepers know they can't get away with it. So you need randomized checks, and you need a custom built cleaning system that forces them to color inside the lines. Even if you have the supply chain, the housekeepers can't be trusted to they won't use the tools that you give them unless you force them to use the tools.
This is good. So do you supply your cleaners with the materials, the liquids, the cleaning solution, the vacuum cleaners to make sure that they always have good stuff, or
Yeah. And here's some things that your cleaner should have. They should have steel wool. The steel wool is one of the easiest things to use to speed up their cleaning, because even if you don't need steel wool, it cleans things faster, right? That's always good. They should have those little like spiky animal hair ball catchers for the laundry and the dryer, right? Because there's going to be hairs in the sheets. So if you throw those little anti-hair little rubber balls in the washer and dryer, it captures all the hair. So the likelihood of there being hair on the sheets when they make the bed is way lower. They need to have Allen wrenches and regular wrenches like Phillips screwdriver, stuff like that, because your furniture will get loose. If they don't have the Allen wrenches, they won't tighten down the furniture and they won't tell you that the furniture is loose, right? But you have to give them the tools and you have to inspect that they did it. And then the toilet seat cover. How many of your toilet seat covers in an Airbnb are loose, right? If you give your housekeeper, exactly, right? If you get your housekeeper a Phillips screwdriver and say, check the toilet seat cover, and if it's loose, Phillips screwdriver that shit, you make that part of their tasks. And if they don't have the screwdriver, they won't do it and they won't bring it up. So you actually have to give them a small amount of tools, not just cleaning supplies, because otherwise you would have to send a housekeeper to tighten a toilet seat cover. That is extremely cost prohibitive. If there's somebody in the house, they should be trained and expected to do everything humanly possible. And so, yeah, these are things that we've added to our housekeepers' toolbox, right? It's almost like they've got a Batman-style utility belt on the way into the Airbnb. So.
Repair man. I wanted to ask, do you have any contracts or partnerships? I remember when I had a really good Airbnb, it was doing really well, and I was trying to support my local community. There was a spa, a little mini spa down the street from one of my Airbnbs. And I tried to say, hey, give me a discount. I have a really hot Airbnb up the road. Give me a really good discount on a spa package that I can put in my Airbnb. I stole this from him, y'all. You can tell I've been stalking him for a while. But do you have any partnerships with like Total Wine so I can get really good wine on the cheap? Any kind of things like that do you recommend in your course with your students?
Well, I think that changes based on where you are, right? So um, one of my students has properties in the Florida Keys, right? And in the Florida Keys, people can do boat rentals, they can rent golf carts, they can get tickets for like tours and stuff. And they have to uniquely find the proper companies that are willing to wheel and deal for those types of experiential things. And so our students like in Florida Keys have one thing, but then like the Bourbon Trail or in the wine country of like Cali or even here in Texas, those negotiations, they go the same way, but we're targeting wine tours or distillery tours and stuff like that. On the retail side, I don't give away wine. I just don't give it away.
Really?
I've stayed away from it. But we'll retail it, we'll sell wine in some of our properties based on whatever the nightly rate is. So this might be an esoteric overshare, but what you give away may not seem like it affects your brand, but what you ask money for absolutely affects your brand, right? So if you're going to sell something, you need to sell something that meets the level it actually needs to exceed the level of the quality of the product that you're hosting. But you also need to make sure that it's affordable. So if I have a $100 a night apartment, I'm not going to be selling $80 bottles of wine, right? That will be a reach, right? But I could sell a $45 bottle of wine and probably get away with it. With houses where the nightly rate's $400 or $600 a night, I can sell all sorts of stuff that people will pay for, right? I can sell an $80 bottle of wine. And in a $500 a night house, I don't want to sell a $30 bottle of wine unless that $500 a night house is just meant to be a sheer volume play where the furniture is cheap and everything else. Then okay, I'll sell a $30 bottle of wine. But the water that you sell needs to be like Voss in Fiji and nice stuff. The snacks that you sell need to be really nice things too. Don't you try to sell a Snickers bar, right? Don't sell rolled gold pretzels. Don't sell the basics like Triscuits. You need to go beyond that, because when people see what you're trying to get them for money-wise, they're going to judge you on the quality of the thing that you're offering. And we're in hospitality, so everything is experiential to a degree. You need to be bringing people things to experience. So We don't give away anything for free that we don't have to give away for free. And we charge for stuff, but we make sure that the stuff that we charge for is quality. And because we don't move a ton of volume of expensive stuff, I don't think I could get like a liquor distributor to give me a good deal. We could maybe negotiate a deal on some cases, but we've actually never tried that. I'm currently working on a volume-based deal with a hotel sheet towel manufacturer. But there is a company that's easy to work with called Host GPO, and you can get like minimum order quantity based like discount stuff from them. They handle that MOQ side, and you can buy stuff at a pretty good rate from Host GPO. And then Host.co, you can even sell services and stuff like that, like massages and stuff. So that's the direction that we went. I have students where we have to come up with plans on what to retail, what to cross-sell, what to cross-promote, whether it's like in Monteverde, Costa Rica, or Dubai. But in my personal business, and we're all in urban markets, we don't really do the like, hey, get 10% for the restaurant down the street. We don't have that much hustle in our personal portfolio.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing the science and the mindset behind that. You touched on something earlier where you had to, on your sixth property, you had to evict the young lady. What are some tricks of the trade that Airbnb hosts can do to minimize potential squatters or bad guests throwing parties in your Airbnb? Right? What are some tips, some tool level stuff?
Yeah. So things that you can do to prevent bad guests is, of course, try to get booked farther in advance, right? Longer lead time leads to better guest behavior. Charging more leads to better guests. We've never had to evict an Airbnb guest who paid under a certain like nightly rate. We have, though, had people who like their whole thing is to game the system. And so what they'll try to do is they'll try to like book for a little while, like multiple weeks, and then they'll try to squat by not paying the next month, or after a couple of weeks, not paying like a renewal to go in. And they have their little skit with the cops to try to convince them to like believe that they're a tenant. And so level one is prevention, which is get booked further out at a better rate. And so that way you don't have to deal with like speculative guests, last minute guests, stuff like that, right? Also getting bookings on different platforms, like better distribution, like Marriott Homes and Villas. I haven't heard a bad thing about a Marriott Homes and Villas guest yet. Vrbo tends to do better than Airbnb as far as like weird guest behavior and squatting and stuff. Do everything through a channel because the channels kind of end up like partially responsible and have to pay you for holdovers. If you do direct bookings, you really need to be careful because you're taking full like liability to the face. Now, one of my favorite, like I've got two moves if we end up in a chess game with a person who's trying to squat. One is before they know that we know, right? They think that they're working us over, like, oh, I'm trying to get my money right, trying to pay you, whatever. I'll say, hey, we've got a guest checking in like 2 days, right? We need to figure this out. And then the next day, they're like, blah, 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 blah. Like, we got a guest checking in tomorrow, like I said. Can we move you to this other apartment right here? Well, here, let me help you move your stuff. Here's the keys, right? I hand them the keys to another unit. What kind of crazy man would do that, right? So I hand them the keys, like, here, let me help you move your stuff. I gave them possession, but as soon as they transfer possession to the new place, I call the cops and say they're trespassing. They no longer can say that they have business at the old place because they've already relinquished possession and they've been at the new place for a day. And cops will take that and go, you've been here like a day, dude, you got to go. And so we win that. But if they don't take the bait for that, we'll tell the cops that they threatened us, that we don't feel safe and we need an escort, that I have personal effects. Hey, I do Airbnb. I rented my house. This is my house and they won't leave. And if you guys won't kick them out of my house, I'd like to get my stuff at least, right? And so we get a U-Haul and then we grab everything. We grab the couch, the bed, the pillows, the appliances, everything. We have to leave the internet. We have to leave the electricity, sadly, but there's no TV. We don't have to leave the TV. We don't have to leave the bed. So we strip it of everything because a guest that is trying to squat in an Airbnb is doing it because they don't have the furniture. So the moment that they are there with no furniture, their jig's up and they go find a different Airbnb to bust, right? That they're going to try to like their gambit on again. So removing the furniture is like my favorite way to troll on a squatter.
I love that. I love that. My last question, do you incorporate, this is the new age, do you incorporate artificial intelligence in your automation of Airbnb? How do you feel about it? Do you think it's here to stay? Do you think it's a fad? Do you think it can't work in Airbnb?
Yeah, we use AI to crawl through all of our documentation and it'll find the answers for our VAs. So a guest asks a question, we open up, like the VA will read the question, but an AI will actually load everything that they need to know. So that way they can just answer it without having to dig for information. That's one. Two is I'm launching a new company, and maybe by the time this podcast goes live, we're supposed to go live this next week, by the way. It's called B&B Photo Factory, okay? So B&B Photo Factory, exactly like you expect, you can find it on Instagram. We made it so that way you could take your phone, right? You could go to your apartment. You get it. There's a tutorial on how to take photos. Like I teach you, take the photo from this angle, just like this, and upload it. Take this photo over here, upload it, go to your bathroom, do the same. With your camera phone, even as junk as your camera phone is, without any good lighting, all of it, right? Your lighting can be terrible, the photos could be blurry. You could have pizza on the lens of your phone. We recreate the photos. So instead of photo editing, we actually recreate all of your photos and we fix everything. So as if you were a real estate photographer, the photos will be perfectly level, perfectly composed. If you were missing the ceiling or the floor, we will actually regeneratively build your room from the photo you gave us and actually make a perfect depiction of your space the proper way with a great even lighting. We'll fix all the lighting problems. If your toilet is open, we close it. If there's no toilet paper, we'll add toilet paper. If there's no towels, we'll add towels. If you have ugly pillows on the bed or you don't know how to tuck the bed, we make the bed look nice and crispy, like hotel quality tuck. We do all of it, right? So B&B Photo Factory is an AI-led photo enhancement / replacement product that allows you to never hire a real estate photographer ever again. And I'm using these photos on my like $600 and $700 a night listings, and we're getting bookings for these bigger products because the photos look good. So yeah, that's how I'm using AI. But I'm launching a company which is a service for Airbnb houses. That's what I'm doing. So
incredible. This has been an incredible conversation. Sir, you've shared so many nuggets, so many tips, so much wisdom this episode. If you had one more nugget in the hat, what would you say to that aspiring entrepreneur who's still against the fence and not sure if they want to get in the Airbnb space because of the past experiences? What would you say to that young boy, that young girl entrepreneur right now?
Well, you're where you are because you're unsure, right? When I was young, I was unsure about a lot of things. I was unsure of myself most of all. And I lived my life in accordance to the fact that I did not have self-confidence and I followed other people that were more confident than me. I was living off of their confidence, right? That's why we go to work for people, right? My first sales job was somebody else was confident that I would be good at sales. Your confidence is always external to something else fed into you until you learn to have it on your own. And you're not going to be confident, and that's okay. But you have to recognize the reason why you're not confident is you just haven't learned to be it yet. And if Airbnb is the first thing that you do while you're unconfident, it's a pretty safe thing to build your confidence in. If you chicken out and don't build an Airbnb business, okay, whatever. But there will be something in the future that you will have to do to build your authentic confidence one day. It is like the metaphorical like dragon that we have to slay from the storybooks, right? And Airbnb is overall a safe one, I think. It's a pretty good business model. But anybody that I've ever met that's been held back on starting any business at all is because they haven't been able to really understand that everything that they've ever done is because they believed in someone else or something else that was pushed upon them by someone else. And as soon as you become internally generative, you're unstoppable. And so if you're telling us, hypothetically, that you're unsure of starting an Airbnb business, then what you're saying is that you're unsure of yourself. Because if you were sure of yourself, you go, you know what? I can do stuff. I just don't think Airbnb is a good enough opportunity. And if you said that to me, I could respect that answer. If you could say, you know what, I know stuff, I know what I can do, I know how the world works enough, I don't think Airbnb is a good opportunity, I'd say let's have a conversation on your merits there. But if you're just like, I just don't know if I can, that's a you problem. And fixing that you problem, this is not an Airbnb answer, but fixing that you problem is going to be the most powerful thing you ever do in your entire life.
Absolutely. How can people find you? How can people connect? How can people learn and get on board with what you're doing and teaching?
Well, if the algorithm still likes me, you type in Airbnb on YouTube and you just look for the beard. That's it. You'll see, right? So my name's Sean, but you type in Airbnb, I think I've kind of cornered the algorithm on YouTube for Airbnb. And I hope to keep that way by continuing to give value. I'm going to try to stay up there.
Absolutely. Connect, y'all. This man is fantabulous. Again, he got me through some dark times when I was doing Airbnb. So we got to let this incredible man go. He has many more lives to change, many more clients to teach, and many more people to help. So like we end every show, I want to say this to you, brother. Absolutely. I want to say this to you.
Yeah.
Never quit. Don't ever quit. We need you. We need what you're doing, what you're teaching. Absolutely. And like we end every show, take care of your friends, take care of your family, and always take care of business. This is Marcus, your favorite gentleman, and the incredible Sean signing off. Love you guys. Bye.